Never take joy in another person's misfortunes, and always try to help another person when they're down. Folks, in today's video we're going to talk about how to start prepping. This video will be good for those who want to start prepping but have no idea where to start, and also for those who may feel overwhelmed about how and where to start. This video will tell you how to start out and build your preps up as you begin your prepping journey. And we'll jump right into that right after the channel intro.
Remember, you are ultimately responsible for protecting yourself and for providing for yourself. Always be the wolf hunter. Don't be the sheep nor the wolf.
Folks, up front I want to state that this video is in no way a complete guide to prepping. This video is just simply to help out brand new preppers who want to start prepping but don't know where to begin. I also want to point out that I'll put links down in the description box to whatever items and or videos that I talk about in this video. And I'm going to go by what every person needs to survive: shelter, water, food, protection, personal hygiene, and then medical. And I'm going to use the old adage of a person being able to survive 3 hours without shelter, 3 days without water, and then 3 weeks without food, etc. And this list will be in the order of what I think is most important to least important. And of course, everybody will have their own ideas of what's more important. But if I were a beginner prepper, this would be the course of action I would follow to have a starting point in order to start building up my preps. And I think it's probably best to build up all of your preps equally, to build all of them up a little at a time. So once you get your week's worth of water, then go for a week's worth of food, etc. And once you get a week's worth of all of your preps, then start working on the second week's worth of these same preps. I just don't think it will do you any good to have a year's worth of food but then have no water to cook that food, or to die from a simple cut that got infected, etc. Now the first thing that you need is shelter. Now I won't spend too much time on this because I'm going to assume that if you're watching this video, then it's probably from your home. Now down the road you'll want to get alternative shelters that you can have the option to go to if SHTF happens. But that's a little bit down the road for many brand new preppers at this point. And my video that's titled How to Get into a Prepper Retreat Group talks about how to join prepper groups and retreat groups for alternative shelter should you have to bug out from your home. The second thing that you're going to need is water, and if a real SHTF situation happens, you may not be able to depend on water from your sink. So some good things to start off with are the water bob, which is a bladder that you put into your bathtub and fill with water. This will obviously only be good if you know beforehand that the city water will be shut off, but it's a good backup to have. And you can also buy gallons of water at the grocery store, usually for about $1 per gallon. Now if you do this, you'll want to buy the gallons that are made of the thicker plastic. The thinner plastic jugs will sometimes degrade faster than what you want, and you may end up with a bunch of water in your house. Now what I highly suggest is getting rain barrels to catch rainwater if you live in an area that gets any rain at all. This is a great way to get backup water that will replenish itself each time that it rains. Now I got my food grade 55-gallon drums for $25 each. And if money is tight for you, you should consider buying only 1 or 2 drums at first until you get some of your other preps built up. Then go back and revisit buying more drums. To see a very easy way to set up rain barrels at your house, watch my video titled Water for SHTF, a Poor Man's Rain Catchment. And also be sure to search out other videos on the subject too, because you'll see some much better systems than what I've done. Now a good rule of thumb is to try to prep for 1 gallon of water per person per day in your household. And this is a minimum amount just for drinking and cooking. You may even want to consider eventually getting to the point where you have 2 or 3 gallons of water per person per day for cleaning and hygiene. Now with water, you're going to want a way to purify that water. And it's my understanding that Berkey water filters, actually called Elements, are the best. Now a Berkey water purifier can be expensive, sometimes running over $200. But you can always just buy the filters themselves and then make your own water purification system using 2 food grade buckets. Now the Elements by themselves can be expensive too. They'll run you about $100 for 2 of them. but it's my understanding that the Sawyer all-in-one filter is pretty good also, and the whole setup will cost you about $72. Now, it's my understanding that the Berkey will remove a few more contaminants than the Sawyer, but I think they both have their pluses and their minuses. And of course, if you have the money, then buy the both. Now, since we've got shelter and water out of the way, now let's move on to the next subject in order of importance, which is food. Now, if I were just starting to prep, I would probably go out and buy me a couple of weeks worth of ramen noodles up front. They're super cheap, and at least they'll give you some sustenance should SHTF hit tomorrow. After that, I would buy rice and a variety of different beans that you will need to put into Mylar bags with oxygen absorbers. They're also called O2 absorbers. But put these in Mylar bags with O2 absorbers for long-term food storage into food-grade buckets. Be sure to search out storing food long-term here on YouTube. Maybe use the search term how to store rice long-term. You'll find that there's a lot of videos that show how to put these foods into the Mylar bags and then use the oxygen absorbers. And doing this to get dried foods like rice and beans to last up to 30 years. Now, a 50-pound bag of rice may cost you between $20 to $40 depending on where you buy it at. And it's my understanding that you want to buy white rice because I've heard that brown rice doesn't have the same lengthy shelf life as white rice. Now, while rice will run you between $20 to $40, about 50 pounds of assorted beans will run you right around $50. Now, 50 pounds of beans will have around 75,000 calories, and 50 pounds of rice will have around 80,000 calories. So for between $70 to $90, you'll have around 155,000 calories worth of rice and beans, or about 77 meals for one person, or around 25 days worth of food at around 2,000 calories per day for one person. Now, besides the beans and rice for immediate food to buy, I'd also buy 25 pounds of wheat to put into Mylar bags. I think it only runs about $7 for a 25-pound bag at the LDS store if you have one in your area. Now, unground wheat is usually referred to as wheat berries, and they don't look anything like berries. They look like a typical grain, but you can sprout these wheat berries and eat them should you run out of your other food. And it typically only takes 2 or 3 days to sprout these wheat berries in water, and they can turn into emergency food and provide you with a lot of nutrition to at least keep you alive if something happens to all of your food. Now, I like to use the thicker 5mm Mylar bags with the Ziploc tops. Instead of putting all 25 pounds of food into one bag and into one bucket, I like to divide up the food into multiple bags in that one bucket. That way, if you spring a leak and air gets into your food and spoils it, then you've only lost a portion of your food in that bucket instead of the whole bucket of food. Now, I still heat seal the top of the Mylar bag, and I don't rely on the Ziploc to keep all of the air out. But my reasons for using the Ziploc Mylar bags is another whole different video, but I like these bags from Mylar Pro on eBay. Now, while most people prefer to use 300cc oxygen absorbers in their 1-gallon sized Mylar bags, I have had better luck with putting 2 of these 300cc absorbers per bag, which makes it actually 600cc. And I have had good luck with these O2 absorbers off of Amazon and have had a very low failure rate with these. Now, once you get this basic immediate amount of food that you can probably afford right now or pretty soon, then as more money comes in and you build up your other preps, then you can buy more food like this and even add more variety, such as potato flakes and dried corn and oats and other dry goods that can be stored long term in the Mylar bags. And then once you get a pretty decent amount of these dried goods built up, and also some of your other preps built up, then you can look at the more expensive freeze-dried foods such as Mountain House to add even more variety to your long-term food stores. However, as a word of warning, it is my understanding that freeze-dried foods have a tendency to be very high in sodium and other preservatives. And I've heard that if you try to live off of a diet of nothing but freeze-dried foods for an extended period of time, that it will be hard on your health. So as a prepper, I would not try to plan on making all of my food preps these freeze-dried foods. With them being unhealthy as a main diet and also how expensive they are, I would only get them after I had plenty of other food preps. And I would only get them to add more variety. Now, a couple of years ago, I discovered the LDS Cannery, which is from the Latter-day Saints religion, also known as Mormons. They have what is called the Bishop Storehouse, where they'll sell many items in number 10 cans that are already prepped for long-term food storage. And they don't seem to be really any more expensive than the dried goods that you buy in bulk to put into Mylar bags yourself for long-term food storage. So to be honest with you, if I were a beginner prepper today, I'd probably buy from the LDS Cannery rather than doing it up myself. And with the money you'd save from not having to buy the food grade buckets and the Mylar bags and the O2 absorbers, plus the time that you'll save bagging it all up, I think it may actually be cheaper to buy from the LDS Cannery. However, not every state has a LDS Cannery, but you can visit their website to get the order form and to also see if they have one in your area or not. And you don't have to be a Mormon to shop there either. It's been my experience that they will not ask you anything about your religious views and will just simply ring you up without any questions asked. And I'll put a link to their website down in the description box with all the other links. Now, at the same time that you're building up your food preps, you'll also want to start learning how to garden. If you live in an apartment with some type of balcony or something like that, you can also grow food in buckets, or at least see if a nearby relative will let you garden on their land. My point is that if SHTF were to happen, that you risk running out of your long-term food that you've got stored. So it's imperative to learn how to garden before SHTF happens. If there's one thing I've learned is that gardening is not as simple as one would think. And you want to learn from your mistakes and learn how to successfully grow your own food now before SHTF happens. Now, since we've talked about the top needs of shelter, then food, then water, now let's talk about the next subject in order of importance, that being protection. You'll obviously want the ability to protect yourself or your family or your preps should SHTF happens. If you have the money, you'll want a good battle rifle like the AR-15 or the AK-47. Also, you'll want a good handgun and a good shotgun and a good .22 caliber rifle, and maybe even a scoped rifle for distance shooting. But if you don't have a lot of money and you don't already have firearms, then at least get a good pump shotgun or a .22 caliber rifle. Both can be used for self-defense and also hunting. I personally can't decide which one I would rather have if I could only have one firearm, and I've seen people argue back and forth about which one would be best for SHTF. And I think they both have their advantages and disadvantages. So this is just something that you'll have to decide for yourself. Now, if you have a firearm or firearms, then obviously you're going to need ammunition. If you want to know how much ammo you'll want for each firearm, then watch my video titled How Much Ammo to Stockpile for SHTF. And while I like to have several thousand rounds at minimum, when I was a beginner prepper, I would buy a box or two at a time to build up my supplies while I also purchased my other food preps. Now, the way that I was able to purchase the bulk of my ammo and also my other preps was I began working extra jobs beyond my full-time job for the extra money. Basically, my full-time job paid the bills, and the money I made from extra jobs all went towards my prepping. But along with your firearms and ammunition, you will need training. While it's best to actually fire your weapon, there are a lot of handling and dry firing skills that you can do at home if you don't have the ammunition or a gun range you can go to easily. For some examples of firearms training, check out my video titled Dynamic Firearm Drills, and also be certain to search out other YouTube videos on firearms training. You'll find many more videos on training with your weapons that will be better than my video. Now, if you don't live in a free area that allows firearms, then really research your local laws to see what weapons you can legally own. We need to remember that weapons are the great equalizer against much larger attackers or multiple attackers that are out to seriously hurt you. And if you do live in a free state that allows firearms, I personally think it would be silly not to add them with your preps. I've seen anti-gun preppers, and I personally think that they're setting themselves up for failure by thinking that they won't need them during SHTF and not allowing themselves to acquire and train with them. Now, I don't think preppers need to be gun nuts. Firearms and personal protection are just a part of prepping. A prepper doesn't need to fixate on guns and tactical gear and neglect the other important facets of prepping. Now, since we've talked about shelter, water, food, and protection, let's talk about the next part of prepping in order of importance, and that being personal hygiene. Because it's not going to do you any good to have all of the food in the world just to die because you prepared food from a contaminated surface. And bathing and cleaning and washing also helps to keep you from getting sick by washing the bad stuff off of your body. And being able to clean yourself may also help you from getting infections, especially if you cut yourself or something like that. As a beginner prepper, I would buy a spray bottle of multi-purpose cleaner, and also a cheap bottle of dish soap, and a couple of bars of bath soap, and a box of cheap powdered laundry detergent, and a tube of toothpaste. And I would do this every couple of weeks until you eventually get a full year's worth of these items built up. And the Dollar Tree or another dollar store is a great place to get this stuff fairly cheap. I would also buy a box of Pool Shock, not the kind with the algicide in it, but regular Pool Shock. You can use this to make bleach that can be used for cleaning and also for water purification. These boxes of Pool Shock aren't too expensive, and you can make so much bleach out of one box. And there's plenty of YouTube videos showing how to do this, so be sure to check them out. But a good way to decide of what personal hygiene items that you need is to take notes of what you use on a regular basis over a full month's time, and to make sure that you have those items that you know that you're going to need. And for items that you don't regularly use, and also for beautification items, you'll probably be able to live without them should SHTF happen. And you'll only want to purchase extra of these items once you get all of your other more needed preps built up. Now, since we've covered the subjects of shelter and water and food and protection and hygiene, let's cover the next topic in order of importance, which is medical. Now, I think that some preppers may be possibly kidding themselves when they think they'll be performing major surgeries during SHTF. I think we just need to accept the reality that if a lot of modern medicine goes to the wayside because of SHTF, that a lot of people are going to die when we don't have sterile surgery rooms, electricity to run ventilators to provide artificial life support, and experienced surgeons and doctors and nurses to perform these functions. However, I think it would be very wise for beginner preppers to learn basic first aid skills while they're building up their other preps. Learning how to clean wounds to keep them from getting infected. Learning how to identify symptoms of different common illnesses and how to treat them. All of these will probably come in very handy, and I think a book on home remedies will come in really handy for this type of knowledge. Now, I believe that everyday type of over-the-counter medications will be worth their weight in gold should SHTF happen. So buying a box of anti-diarrhea medicine will be smart. You don't want to die of dehydration because you caught something that gave you the extreme runs. You'll also want at least a box of flu and cold medicines and cough medicine. At least enough to get you through at least one long, hard, cold winter. Also, don't forget other small items, such as vitamins to make up any nutritional downfalls you may have, a bottle of rubbing alcohol, a tube of antibiotic cream like Neosporin, a box of assorted Band-Aids, a bottle of aspirin or whatever type of painkillers that you prefer, and allergy medicine if you suffer from allergies. Everyday items like this will probably be worth their weight in gold should SHTF happen. And the Dollar Tree again is a great place to get stuff like this without breaking your wallet. And you should also take a look at the possibility of using fish antibiotics for SHTF. Now, let me give a disclaimer here. I am not condoning taking fish antibiotics rather than seeing your doctor. I would only take fish antibiotics if a major SHTF event happened and I became extremely sick and there were no doctors to see and no pharmacies to provide this. Basically, I would only resort to this if it meant taking them or dying. But from my understanding, fish antibiotics are the same thing as human antibiotics and could be taken by humans should SHTF happen and as a last resort. But once a month or once every couple of months, I would buy 1 bottle of the 7 types of antibiotics most used and slowly buy them over a couple of years' time until you have an amount that you're comfortable with. Now, while antibiotics won't cure the common cold or the flu, they will fight infections that commonly happen with these illnesses, such as the throat and ear and respiratory infections. And I'll put a link to a great website that gives you the name of the antibiotic and the fish antibiotic that they're equivalent to, and even the dosages that you would want to take. And one last tidbit, reference prepping medically. If you have minor health issues that could be taken care of with a healthy diet and exercise, now is the time to start correcting it and to be working on that at the same time that you're building up your other preps. So folks, I think this is a pretty good map to get a beginning prepper started. And I also think it's at least a good starting point and a plan on how to build from there. And remember, try to resist the urge to buy all of a certain type of prep all at once and then inadvertently ignore other badly needed preps. Secure your way to get water and purify it first, then get a little food, then buy a little ammo, then get a few weeks worth of hygiene stuff, then get a few boxes of the most needed medical stuff, and then once you do all of that, then get a little bit more water or a way to collect it, then get a little bit more food, etc. And don't forget to regularly hit your local Goodwill or other secondhand stores. You'll find a lot of good prepping items such as cookware and clothing for a lot cheaper than if you were to buy everything online or brand new. For me, I like having a little more than a year's worth of preps in my inventory. I want to be able to get through a long, hard, cold winter if needed. And I also want to warn you not to get too caught up in all the prepping gear. There's a lot of junk out there and people trying to take your money. I try to be as independent as possible from this gear because this gear will almost always eventually break on you, and I don't want to be dependent on something that won't last as long as the knowledge on how to make it yourself. I will also put a link below to a very good video that Canadian Prepper did on the top 10 prepping items that he has found to be the best and to actually be useful. Now, once you get these main preps that I talked about built up to the point that makes you feel comfortable, then you should start looking further into other preps that will also possibly be eventually needed when the time is right to purchase them. Items such as radios and ways to communicate, and ways to heat your shelter such as a wood-burning stove and extra firewood, extra clothes and extra winter clothing, learning tactics and strategy to defend your home or your prepper retreat, learning how to can and preserve your food, and think about getting a grain mill so that you can grind your wheat into flour and corn into cornmeal, and multiple ways to cook your food such as firewood or cooking fuel, and some good pots and pans that will stand up to this type of cooking, and also body armor and force multipliers like night vision, and making lye so you can make your own soap, and making yeast so you can make bread. And if you wear glasses or contacts, consider getting LASIK surgery so you don't have to worry about broken eyeglasses or losing a contact. Now, for you experienced preppers out there that went ahead and watched this video and are itching to comment on something that I may have forgotten, or on something that I forgot to give further instructions on how to do something, please remember that this video was for beginner preppers, and also please remember that I couldn't go into full detail on every single thing and still keep this video at a reasonable time limit. But if you have something valuable to add to this video, something that you think will really help out a brand new prepper, then please comment and share your ideas. And beginner preppers, be sure to read the comments below to see what other experienced preppers have shared. So just to recap this video, if you are a brand new prepper, first get at least 1 week or 2 weeks worth of water, or the way to catch rainwater, and also the ability to purify that water. Then get a couple of weeks worth of ramen noodles. Then get 50 pounds of rice and 50 pounds of different types of beans, or visit an LDS cannery if you have one in your area to get at least a couple of weeks worth of food. Then get at least one firearm that can be used for both hunting and self-protection, and only start off with a couple of boxes of ammunition for that firearm. Then get a little bit of each type of clothing and soaps and cleaners that you use regularly. Then get a little bit or 1 bottle of each type of over-the-counter medication that you use regularly. And also don't forget to include anti-diarrhea medicine and rubbing alcohol. And then consider slowly buying 1 bottle of fish antibiotics at a time until you get the most common ones all built up. And once you've reached this baseline of minimum preps, then purchase a little more of each of them and keep repeating this until you've reached a point that makes you feel comfortable. Lastly, really search out different YouTube videos and websites that go deeper into all of these individual subjects. Anyways, folks, if you found this video to be informative, then please consider subscribing to this channel, as I plan on making many more videos down the road. And folks, if you made it this far, thank you very much for watching, and I pray that you have a good night.